The Cherokee woman stood in the sheriff's office, her hands trembling as she spoke words that would haunt him forever. "Hire me for one night. My daughter is starving." Her eyes held no shame, only the terrible mathematics of survival. What price dignity? What cost self-respect when a 6-year-old girl cries from hunger under a bridge? The sheriff saw it all in that moment. 3 days without food, every door slammed shut, every job denied, desperation peeling away everything until only raw maternal love remained. She was offering him a choice that would define them both. Would he see a desperate woman to exploit, or a mother willing to sacrifice everything? The answer would change 2 lives forever. Sheriff Elijah Carter sat at his desk in the Tahlequah jailhouse, reviewing reports in the fading October light. Outside, the Oklahoma Territory wind carried the scent of wood smoke and coming winter. It had been a quiet day, the kind he preferred in a town still finding its footing between Cherokee tradition and American expansion. The door opened with a hesitant creak. A Cherokee woman stood in the doorway, thin as a rail, her dark hair pulled back severely from a face marked by exhaustion and something harder, desperation. Her dress, once probably decent, hung loose on her frame, patched and repatched. She clutched a faded shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. "Sheriff?" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried a weight that made Elijah set down his pen. "Yes, ma'am. What can I do for you?" She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. Her hands trembled as she twisted the shawl's fabric. "My name is Nora Swimmer. I need—" She swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. "I need to ask you something." Elijah stood, sensing this wasn't a typical complaint or report. "Please, sit down. No." The word came out sharp, almost panicked. "If I sit, I might not have the courage to stand again." She took a shaking breath. "I need money. My daughter, Lily, she's 6 years old. We haven't eaten in 3 days. The boarding house where I worked closed last month. No one will hire me. They say—" Her voice cracked. "They say a Cherokee widow brings bad luck." Elijah's chest tightened. He'd seen the prejudice, the way some treated the Cherokee people as unwelcome guests in their own homeland. "I can help you find work." "There is no work." Nora's eyes met his, dark and fierce despite her frailty. "I've knocked on every door, begged at every shop. I've sold everything we owned except the clothes we're wearing." She straightened her spine, summoning dignity from some deep reserve. "So I'm here to make you an offer, Sheriff. Hire me for one night. I'll do whatever you need. Clean, cook, whatever you ask. Just pay me enough to buy food for my daughter, please." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications and desperation. Elijah stared at the woman before him, understanding immediately what her offer meant, what she was willing to sacrifice. The ambiguity in her words was deliberate, born of a mother's desperation, willing to surrender everything for her child's survival. "Mrs. Swimmer, I know what you're thinking." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. "I know how this sounds, but I've walked the streets for days with my daughter getting weaker. I've watched her cry from hunger pains. I've held her while she asked why her stomach hurts so much." Nora's hands clenched into fists. "I'm a mother before I'm anything else. Before I'm Cherokee, before I'm a woman, before I have dignity or pride. I'm a mother, and I will do anything, anything, to keep my child alive." Elijah felt something crack in his chest. He'd been sheriff for 5 years, had seen poverty and desperation, but nothing like the raw maternal ferocity standing before him. "Where's your daughter now?" "Under the bridge by Bayou Creek. We've been sleeping there since we lost our room." Nora wiped her eyes roughly. "She's too weak to walk far, so I left her with our blanket. I told her—" Her voice broke. "I told her Mama would bring food. I promised her." "Jesus Christ," Elijah muttered, running a hand through his hair. He walked to the window, looking out at the darkening street. Behind him, he heard Nora's quiet breathing, could almost feel her preparing herself for whatever he decided. The right choice should have been obvious. But watching this woman stand there, willing to destroy herself for her child, forced him to confront uncomfortable truths about his town, his people, the system that had pushed her to this edge. "I'm not going to hire you for the night, Mrs. Swimmer." He turned to face her. The light died in her eyes. She nodded slowly, accepting defeat. "I understand. I'm sorry for... but I am going to help you." Elijah opened his desk drawer, pulling out his wallet. "And you're going to let me because your daughter needs you strong, not broken." Nora's legs seemed to give out. She caught herself on the desk, staring at him with confusion and fragile hope. "I don't want charity," Nora whispered, even as her eyes fixed on the money in Elijah's hands. "It's not charity, it's payment." Elijah pulled out several bills. "You said you'd work for one night. Fine, you're hired, not for what you were implying, but for honest work." He met her eyes firmly. "My house is a disaster. My late wife handled everything, and since her passing 2 years ago, I've let it fall apart. I need someone to organize, clean, do laundry. One full night of work, say 8 hours, at fair wages." Nora's mouth opened, then closed. Suspicion warred with desperation on her face. "Why would you do this?" "Because you walked through that door, willing to sacrifice everything for your child. That's not something I can turn away from." Elijah counted out bills. "This is enough for a week's worth of food, maybe more if you're careful. Take it. Feed your daughter. Then tomorrow evening you come to my house and do the work I'm paying you for. Address is on this paper." He held out the money and a hastily scrawled address. Nora stared at both, like they might disappear. "This isn't a trick." Her voice was barely audible. "No trick, no expectations beyond the work I described." Elijah's voice softened. "Mrs. Swimmer, I can't fix everything that's wrong in this town. I can't change how some people think about the Cherokee. But I can make sure a 6-year-old girl doesn't go to sleep hungry tonight. Let me do that much." Nora's hand shook violently as she reached for the money. When her fingers closed around it, she made a sound between a sob and a gasp. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you. I'll work hard. I promise I'll—" "I know you will. Now go get your daughter." Elijah opened the door for her. "There's a boarding house on Main Street, Mrs. Patterson's place. Tell her I sent you. She'll give you a room for the night and won't ask questions." Nora clutched the money to her chest like a lifeline. She looked at Elijah with something close to awe, then turned and rushed out into the night. Through the window, he watched her run, actually run toward Bayou Creek, her exhaustion forgotten in her desperate need to reach her child. Elijah sat down heavily, realizing his hands were shaking too. He thought of his own daughter, lost to fever 3 years ago. Thought of his wife, who died from grief 6 months later. Thought of all the ways love could break you and all the ways it could make you impossibly strong. The next evening, Nora appeared at Elijah's doorstep exactly at 6 o'clock. She looked different, still thin, still worn, but there was color in her cheeks and strength in her posture that hadn't been there before. Behind her stood a small girl with dark, braided hair and enormous eyes, wearing a clean dress that was slightly too big. "Mrs. Swimmer." Elijah nodded. "Sheriff Carter." Nora's voice was steady now, proud. "I brought Lily. I hope you don't mind. I have nowhere safe to leave her, and I wanted you to see—" She placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "I wanted you to meet the reason I walked into your office yesterday." Elijah crouched down to the girl's level. "Hello, Lily. My name is Elijah." The child looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Mama says you're a good man," Lily said softly. "She says you saved us." Something twisted in Elijah's chest. "Your mama saved you. I just helped a little." "You can play in the parlor while I work," Nora told her daughter, producing a small cloth doll from her pocket, clearly a recent purchase from the meager funds. "Be good." For the next 8 hours, Nora worked with an intensity that bordered on fierce. She cleaned, organized, laundered, and scrubbed, as if trying to repay not just the money, but some deeper debt. Elijah made coffee and attempted small talk, learning pieces of her story. Her husband had died in a farming accident the previous spring. They'd had a small plot of land, but without him to work it, she'd lost it to debt. She'd tried to find work in Tahlequah, but prejudice and suspicion followed her. Some claimed Cherokee women were lazy. Others feared hiring them would anger white customers. The few jobs available went to white widows or married women who deserved them more. "I'm a good worker," Nora said quietly, polishing a window with methodical precision. "I'm educated, attended the Cherokee Female Seminary before I married. I can read, write, do arithmetic. But none of that matters when people won't give you a chance." Elijah watched Lily, sleeping peacefully on his sofa, her small body finally relaxed in genuine rest rather than hunger-induced exhaustion. "What if I could help you find real work?" he said suddenly. "I know people. I could vouch for you." Nora's hands stilled on the window. "You've already done so much. I'm the sheriff. Part of my job is protecting citizens, all citizens. That includes making sure they can survive." He met her eyes. "You said you can read and write. The schoolhouse needs help. The teacher, Miss Bennett, has been overwhelmed with students. I could introduce you." 3 days later, Elijah walked Nora to the schoolhouse on the edge of town. Miss Bennett, a stern but fair woman in her 50s, looked skeptical at first. But when Nora read a passage from a McGuffey reader with perfect diction and demonstrated her penmanship, something shifted. "The children need help with their letters," Miss Bennett said carefully, "particularly the younger ones. I could use an assistant a few days a week. It doesn't pay much, but it's honest work," Nora finished, her voice thick with emotion. "That's all I need." The arrangement started small, 3 days a week, modest wages. But it was steady, it was respectable, it was a chance. Elijah watched from across the street as Nora and Lily walked home that first day, the little girl chattering excitedly about Mama's new job at the school. The desperate woman who'd walked into his office a week ago seemed like a ghost of a different person. That evening, Nora appeared at the jailhouse. She held a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I made bread," she said simply. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it as thanks." Elijah accepted the bundle, feeling its warmth. "You don't need to thank me, Mrs. Swimmer." "Yes, I do." Her dark eyes held his. "You saw me at my lowest moment, when I was ready to surrender everything I valued about myself, and instead of judging me or taking advantage, you gave me back my dignity. You reminded me that I'm not just a desperate mother or a Cherokee widow society wants to ignore. You saw me as a person worth helping." Her voice cracked slightly. "That's a gift I can never fully repay." "You'd have done the same," Elijah said quietly. "Any parent would. Maybe, but not everyone would have helped." She adjusted her shawl. "Lily asks about you every night. She calls you the kind sheriff. She drew you a picture." Nora handed him a piece of paper with a child's crayon drawing, a tall figure with a star on his chest, holding hands with 2 smaller figures. Elijah looked at the drawing, something warm and painful expanding in his chest. "Tell her thank you and tell her—" He paused. "Tell her to keep drawing. She's got talent." After Nora left, Elijah pinned the drawing to the wall beside his desk. In a town still wrestling with old prejudices and new realities, it was a small reminder that sometimes the bravest thing anyone could do was recognize another person's humanity. Sometimes salvation came not from grand gestures, but from simple acts of seeing someone's desperation and choosing compassion over judgment. The October wind rattled the jailhouse windows, carrying the promise of winter. But inside, Elijah felt something like hope, fragile and new, but real. A mother's fierce love had walked through his door, and in choosing to honor it rather than exploit it, he discovered something essential about who he wanted to be. Not just a sheriff enforcing laws, but a man standing for justice in its truest form, recognizing that every person, regardless of their heritage or circumstances, deserved dignity, opportunity, and the chance to protect those they loved.